My name is Dometi Pongo. I'm honored to know these sisters personally and peripherally. I've been watching you guys from afar, and this is a sacred experience being able to watch this film together. So put your hands together one more time for this beautiful Black women-led cast and creative crew. Again, my name is Dometi. I host a show on MTV News called True Life Crime, where we investigate the intersection between, sordid crimes that happen to young people and how it intersects with social justice issues that may have led to their demise. So work like this is right up this alley. Before we begin the conversation, if we could just take 5 seconds to honor and give a moment of silence, not just for Kia Boyd, but to Black women who have lost their lives to police violence, gender-based violence, and Black identifying women, and also to 2 brothers who meant a lot to this movement and everybody on the stage who lost their lives in recent weeks. My brother Malik and my brother Squeak. Moment of silence, 5 seconds, please. Thank you for that. I want to begin this off. We're going to have like 4, I like to start this off with like 4 objectives I want to hit to make sure that we stay. Yeah.
He's organized. I like him.
So I want to talk about the personal journey you guys experienced. I want to talk about love as a politic. I want to talk about, Janaé, your work in that Venn diagram. We talked about intersectionality of the systems we experience and your mission of showing what leadership should and could look like when Black women are in charge. I want to begin with the personal journey with our director, Ashley. Something that struck me in the discussion guide, you talk about how, as a student at Northwestern's film school, being one of the only persons.
One of like 5 Black people in the school, yeah.
So how did that experience lead you to this experience creating this film? And did you know when you started filming and gathering this archival footage over the course of 4 years that it would actually culminate to a project, or were you just figuring that stuff out as you were going?
You want the real answer?
You're damn right.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, so I, like you said, I went to film school at Northwestern for undergrad, and while I was there, I was really focused on my technical skills as a cinematographer, but that's where I took my first documentary production course and was like, oh, I can frame real world issues that have a significant impact on the world. And I was already up in Northwestern, raising hell. I'd be coming up into my cinematography classes with super Black projects and not giving a fuck. So yeah, that's kind of where I found my resisting spirit.
How was that received?
I just got A's because they were scared to say otherwise. I'm so serious. It was very funny. But yeah, so when I started this project, I was less than 6 months out of school. But the movement was happening. I mean, you were in Chicago at the time in the fall of 2015, and if you were there, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was in the film somewhere talking
about
it.
You He treated this, he ain't new to this.
I'm a shadow, which is why I love the film, and I want to let you film. But why I love the film so much is, a lot of times as a journalist and not an activist, I feel like a fly on the wall, and there's this line, this invisible line that you're not supposed to cross in terms of objectivity. So I'm marching, covering the protest. You know what I'm saying? Hoping I don't get caught on camera saying the chants and whatnot while I'm working at WGN, And so I imagine you told that same line because we're all professionals, Black in these spaces, but our politics, who we are, and how we exist informs our professional pursuits. But continue where you were.
No, for sure. I mean, if you were in the city at that time, it was a visceral experience to see what young Black people were doing around the movement for Black lives. I started filming while they were in the middle of the campaign for Kia Boyd, and then a couple months later, the tape of the killing of Laquan McDonald came out, and that really was a hallmark milestone moment in the city. So for me, initially it really just started out as me wanting to tell the story of this movement from the perspective of someone that I could directly identify with as a Black woman. I told both of them it was going to be a short film, and I just think the universe kind of took it and said, you got jokes, because like I said, that moment happened in the city, and I just felt this is so much bigger than this one moment or this one person. And so I just kind of flowed with it and saw where it took me from there.
Morgan, when did you become involved? And what was that process like for you?
I became involved in 2017, around the time I had just moved back to Chicago to do some journalistic pursuits, you know, like as you know, but I was coming from a very different framework than a WGN, because I was saying that the media is failing us, and the idea of objectivity is a myth, you know. Objectivity doesn't exist. We're just all used to hearing an old white heterosexual man's point of view. And those point of views are in our schools and in our textbooks. And then when black people, women, LGBTQ people start to speak, all of a sudden it's like, oh, the other, oh, this is radical, oh, this is not objective, you know. But we all pursue whatever we're pursuing from our own points of view. There's things that draw us to certain people and certain things, and all of that is a bias. So I came on the scene just like I'm ready to reshape narratives from a black perspective, from uplifting the voices of the marginalized people of this city. And Ashley's film was doing that. I mean, I had no intention of joining it. I was just like, girl, I have my own project that I'm working on. But then she sent me the demo, and I sent her like paragraphs in emails, and I was like, okay, I think I'm involved now. But it was a footage that I was seeing of Janaé and of Bella, where I knew this was going to be a compelling story that was a living document of a movement that we were in right now, and that's so rare and so important. And she was doing something special and radical by framing it through the lens of black queer feminist people. And yeah, we don't see that for black liberation movements. So I wanted to be a part of that.
What's funny is, it's funny how things are true until they're not. Like, we don't see that in terms of black liberation movements, but now that is the definition of black liberation movement, right? Like, I mean, Black Lives Matter, or BYP 100, whatever organization you name, that's definitely what it looks like. And I think that the subjects, and I'm gonna ask you this, Bella, like the subjects of the film, we get to see you all grow in real time. Looking back at what you experienced and watching it play back on film, are there any ways that you've grown personally? What was it like having this journey documented? Because, you know, for you, this is, like you said, this is a lifestyle. And yet you're also a performer, but it all happened organically. And then looking back, was there anything that stuck out to you as far as your personal growth?
Yeah, I talk about this often. I was depressed. I was depressed for most of this filming, right? And that's what drove me to the streets. And it wasn't just depression about Laquan McDonald or Rakita Boyd. It was when Ashley started filming this in 2015, that was the year I lost my grandmother. And y'all saw in the film, like, my grandmother was my mother, my father, everything for me. You know, so the way that they hyped up Laquan McDonald's murder video, they was like, we're gonna release it Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Be home, it's gonna come on. You know, it was like, what's wrong with y'all? Like, they was really dropping an album or something, like, what's wrong with y'all, you know? And it was the day before, or 2 days before Thanksgiving that year. And that was my first holiday season without my grandma. So what got me up out the bed, like, I was depressed. I couldn't even get out the bed. My anger got me out the bed. Depression just had me sitting in the house just messed up, just couldn't even, but I was so mad. I was so mad, and that moved me. So I talk about this often, like reaching for a better feeling, right? Like anger felt better than depression. I couldn't do anything with depression. I couldn't move out of depression. Like anger moved me. So when I look at this film, even watching it in an audience with people is different than me watching it virtually or when it came out, you know, so it's like, I know people look at it and see power, see women empowered, and, you know, like, I'm looking at it like, I'm proud of you for a different reason. I'm proud of you for a reason they don't see. I'm proud of you because I know how hurt you was. You know, I know what it took for you to get up that day. You know, for Ashley to come see you that day and see you in the, for her perspective to be, man, I want to follow her. You know, it was so many people. It was so, Chicago is full of brilliant black women. Brilliant black women organizers, and a lot of them, you know, cameos in this film, but any one of them could have been the subject of this film. Right. Any one of them. You know? Yes. So for her to see something in me that was worth her investing everything she had learned, all these resources she had gathered at school and everything from her life that led her to want to be a filmmaker, to say, I want you to be the subject of my first film out of college. You know, and then, like, come on, man, like, she got us in a film at theater at New York City right now. Like, you know what I'm saying, with Dometi Pongo as the movie. You know? So when I look back on it, I'm just like, I'm proud because it's not just young black women, it's a young black depressed woman. You know, and what I know that can do for the next depressed girl who comes see a movie.
That's so powerful. Same question as Janaé, because soon to be Dr. Bonsu.
No, I'm Dr. Bonsu.
Oh, you're Dr. Bonsu now? Hold on.
Actually, I'm Dr. Bonsu Love because I just got married. Like,
Yes.
shout out to my husband in the audience. Hey, boo.
Yes, Dr. Bonsu Love. Dr. Bonsu Love.
Don't play with her.
I mean, the question asks itself. Tell me about that journey. I mean, we seen you like.
So the original plan was for this film to include my actual dissertation defense, but that shit just took a long time. Okay. But no, I defended my dissertation 2 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. No, July 7th. What month is this? What is time?
Time is flat.
Yeah, so I think there's so much growth in this film. You know, filmed over the course of 4.5 years. Both of our birthdays was in this film. I turned 25 in this film. I'm now 30.
Come on.
So I just shows you how much time has elapsed. But you know, I think a personal aspect of my story that I didn't really talk about that's really grounded my why, both in my research and in my organizing around black women in particular. So my dissertation studied the intersections of interpersonal and institutional violence among black women, trans and gender nonconforming people, and really kind of critiqued. So I'm a social worker by training, so my PhD is in social work, and social work has this really problematic relationship with police and the criminal legal system. Really like exalted criminalization as a solution to domestic violence, and we just know that black people in the criminal legal system just we don't mix, right? So when you talk about situations of intimate partner violence, calling the police if you are black and undocumented, or if you are black and poor and live in public housing, if you are black and just any intersection you can name, that's kind of what those Venn diagrams that I was talking about on the film is so important. If you are black and poor and you have a child, right, child welfare or child protective services might come after you and take your kids because you are a victim of violence, right? Yeah. And so there's all these intersections that social work, whether inadvertently or willingly, just ignored when it came to black women, and that was not okay. Me personally, being a survivor of intimate partner violence myself, I think there was a situation that I think most blatantly kind of connected my personal and political. Over 10 years ago now, at Christmas Day, I'll never forget, I felt like I was going to lose my life to a very violent partner, and my mother actually called the police on my behalf. I didn't tell her to, but she's like, I don't know what else to do. This dude is crazy. Like, he got a gun, he know where we live, right? So she called the police, and the police responded, and all they could seem to focus on was what I had done wrong, what I had done to elicit the violence against me, what I had done to set him off, right? So it was just a slew of just victim blaming, nothing that they can do. They was like acting like I had no right to get a restraining order. It was a mess, and that was really my journey before I even knew what abolition was for real. That's when I was like, what was the point of y'all? Like, what do y'all actually do? right? How do you actually help women in this situation, right? And so, you know, I didn't know that 10 years later I would be, you know, this like anti-criminalization activist scholar, right? But I, you know, when we say the personal is political, that shit is real, right? So when I am, you know, screaming at the police board about, you know, why police don't need to have a job in the city of Chicago and everywhere, it's rooted in some personal experience, right? So, you know, my dissertation journey, you know, being able to be unapologetically Black and queer and feminist in my actual research and say, no, I'm studying specifically Black women, trans and gender nonconforming people, and not just their experiences of violence in their households, but in their communities, by the hands of the state, in the different institutions that they have to navigate and rely on to survive. What's your experience? Because so often these scholars in these, you know, ivory tower institutions, they speak for us, when really people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, right? So I really feel like every interview that I did was a healing space on both ends. Like at the end of the interview, we both crying like, damn, sis. You know, and I'm changed. I'm forever changed by my research. And again, you know, it was fueled by the movements that I was in, like these unapologetically Black feminist movements that you were seeing in this film. Like I was in that while I was in grad school the whole damn time. I don't know what it means to be an organizer without being a grad student, right? Like those experiences were so intertwined. So I grew a lot, and at the same time, there's some things that are still the same. Like I see some scenes in that film, and I still want to tear up. And I'm thankful that I'm not desensitized, because that's real too. You know, with so much trauma, so much violence, so much death, at some point you can just get numb to it. And I'm thankful that that's not the case.
I was yeah, give it up for that. You know, a synergy in this space because you eerily answer like my next 3 joints. So I'm gonna ask. but Doc, while I have you, if you could, in as few sentences as possible, is very difficult, but because your work is so complex. But could you expound upon what you kind of talked about, but what you drew in that Venn diagram? We talked about how the welfare system, immigration system, criminal legal system, and I like that nomenclature, not the criminal justice system, how they're all intertwined, and how, you know, it tends to be our Black women that end up, you know, in the throes of that. Can you just talk about what you were getting at, which is part of your dissertation as well, but in a way that, you know, a 5-year-old could?
Good there. Yes. So those are all, as far as I'm concerned, systems of oppression that work together, like very explicitly, have data sharing agreements with each other. You know, when Child Protective Services show up at your door, they're showing up with police, right? There have been times where, you know, the social welfare office, if you get public assistance, they will call you and tell you that, you know, you got to update on your benefits or something. You got to come down to the office and, you know, sign something, and the police will be there waiting for you if you have an open warrant on your arrest. Like, these systems work together, right? So when this concept of intersectionality has become a buzzword that just means, oh, you know, you've got multiple identities. No, it means you are multiple, like you are impacted, multiplied by these different systems of oppression that you are connected to, right? And so basically what I was trying to get at in that diagram is that, you know, when you talk about Black women in particular, or just across the gender spectrum, there's a number of identities that are just differentially impacted by each of those systems, sometimes all at the same time. You know, if you're Black and disabled, if you're, you know, just whatever. And those systems are not, they're by design, you know, colluding to socially control, punish, surveil, and just systematically impacts our lives. So, I mean, I don't know. I I don't know if a 5-year-old would be able to understand that, but that is the best that I can do.
No, that was wonderful.
Okay.
And I'm gonna stay on now. I'm gonna start with Morgan, but I would love if anybody on the panel wants to talk about this, please do. The intersectionality of identity and how complex that is. Because what I love about the film and what happened is we saw Black women lead a fight that we won, or at least a battle. We haven't won a war, we won a battle. All three of them eyes is out. You know, the mayor, state's attorney, and they were all replaced by Black people. Eddie Johnson replaced Gary McCarthy. Kim Foxx replaced Anita Alvarez.
I don't know if that's a good.
I know, but here we go. Y'all gonna love where we going with this then.
The next battle.
And a Black queer woman became mayor of Chicago. Those identities mean nothing. Yeah, right? And it's crazy, Black queer women led the movement, but those identities don't mean nothing when those policies still uphold white supremacy. And Morgan, as a journalist, I know it's like, I know you feel freeing starting something like Tribe because you get to talk about it. You have somebody like Bella interview Lori Lightfoot and write a column about it. But at the time, I was working at mainstream stations where I was trying to find creative ways to say this isn't the milestone that we think it is. You know, I left right before, I think, the inauguration, etc. But my question is, what does identity mean when white supremacist structures are so deeply rooted? And how can we move beyond that?
Different than I didn't even know you were going there. So I'm gonna talk about what I know how to talk about. I just have to comment on Lori Lightfoot first, because what a slap in the face to all of these organizers who you saw were engaged in community, healing each other, nourishing the community. I mean, I'm out in the streets watching people do food drives, clothing drives, all different types of mutual aid, only for national news, international news to fly into Chicago and say, look at the gun violence. Young people don't care about this city. Black people don't care about this city. Oh, and by the way, look, they have a Black queer mayor, like Celebration. And she's putting on costumes and stuff and like taking pictures and doing all types of things. And for me, being so focused on the narrative, you know, we're filming Unapologetic and watching them protest Lori Lightfoot. They still do that to this day. They stand outside her home on her birthday saying, fuck your birthday, Lori. You know, that's what they do. And we in the media, we completely miss the point, and because we are stuck on identity. But when Black people come into these structures, only to gain power for the people who gave them money, then that doesn't do anything for us.
And gaslight community. Lori says that line a lot where she says, you know, it's easy to shout and yell, it's hard to come and have conversation, but we have documented footage of activists in conversation at community meetings.
Right. And this film, in a way, is proof of the power of organizing and activism. So I'm glad that this film is a document, you know, like putting her on the record without giving her more space and time to, you know, to just talk and gaslight and use the media in manipulative ways. But yeah, this has been it's ironic to see the wins of the community, but then you see that Lori Lightfoot, who was head of the police board, becomes the mayor of Chicago, and she used and co-opted a lot of the language of the movement for Black Lives and of these organizers in order to galvanize a base of progressive voters to get her in office.
Ashley, can you weigh in on this one too? Just this idea, from whatever perspective you like, just the idea of even creating space to show these varying identities. And you mentioned, I forget what subject in the film, someone mentions that, you know, who Lori is, what identity is. But then also, you know, after your film is complete, seeing everything culminate to the kind of leader that she turned out to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just points to the importance of needing to archive our own stories, because when I decided to start this film, like, there was no comprehensive media talking about this movement from the perspective of Black women, of queer folks, of trans folks, And I know that historically, Black women and queer folks and trans folks have been at the helm of these movements and integral to the societal shifts that we saw. Women like Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ida B. Wells. And we aren't taught about that in school. Like we weren't taught that in our formal education. So for me, like even when we were cutting the film together, like I was studying this woman because I wanted the film to embody that same spirit. And so I'm just hoping that, you know, I think by archiving this moment in time, like it's hopefully a portal of access for Black women and Black folks to access these women that have these intersectional identities and how they're centering what they need most in the work, not what Black men need or what other privileged identities within Blackness need. They're centering their own needs because that's how we're all going to become free, if we center these people that are furthest at the margins, even within our Black community. And so I'm hoping it's a portal of access so people can really study like what those identities, like what they signify to our community, so they don't look back and say, or look ahead and say, yeah, Lori Life was the right one. Because you know, all skin folk ain't kin folk. But we need that access. Like there's so many people now, so many Black people in Chicago now are like, yeah, we messed up. Like we shouldn't have voted for her. But they didn't have access to a film like Unapologetic, or like their access point is the 5 o'clock news every night that is ran by big news media, which is often colluded with the police and white supremacy. So I don't know. I mean, you know.
No, it's a fact. I'm gonna say WVON is a Black-owned radio station, legendary station in Chicago. We had a community meeting where the leaders of Chicago Sun-Times came through. Mary Mitchell said, "Yo, the Laquan McDonald case shamed us because we basically published the police press release about how this kid was shot as though it were fact."
And won't ask the police no questions, but gonna ask you or any other Black person like a million questions.
And then I'm in the newsroom and I'm using certain words that are seen as unobjective because they're in conflict with the police statements. I'm saying police claim, police said, and they're like, you know what? It's what happened. You know, what do you? I'm not even being an activist. Like, this is the mildest version of this news story. Like, I'm not even trying to be on that. But when we think about, I want to go back to something you said. I know we only got like 5 minutes left. I want to talk about love as a politic. Because as we talk about Black women-led movements and some of the things said about Dr. Bonsu, love was in love. How we want Black men to show up in these movement spaces, but you can't show up with misogyny, which you can't show up with wanting to have access to power because you're a white supremacist in blackface. You know what I mean? If you're coming with that. But oftentimes, I wonder if men feel as welcome in these spaces as they should. What would you like for Black men to know and to do in order to be more supportive of our Black women who are at the forefront? How can we be in community with you? How can we learn to protect you? What do we need to unlearn to be effective in that?
Yes, pass.
Decentering is not erasure.
Say that again. Say that again.
Decentering is not erasure. Just because Black women are the center of this story, Black men are not erased. My brother is a central component of my story.
In fact, when Bella left,
I went to go take a call from my brother. Anybody else, I done got a million calls in here. Ignore. It still go down in the DM, I ain't gonna lie, y'all. But no, like it's in so many. I think on one of the posters for this, it was like, or one of the panels we did, it was another woman moderating, and it was like, I just wish it could be Black men and a part of the conversation. I just wish it was a Black man on the panel, and it's like, bro, like.
but more often than not, though, in your piece, when you said Black men, we love you, and then went on to say how you want Black men to show up, you see women asking for affection, partnership, love. I've seen more women march for Trayvon Martin, leading marches. Like, I mean, I've been on the ground covering this shit. Like, you see a yearning and an outpouring of asking for that compassion. And Ashley, what led your decision to even include what Bella said about love and about how wanting to love a black man is in conflict with her politics? Why was that important? What does love mean to revolution?
Oh, that got deeper than where I was about to go. I mean, honestly, I think what Bella was discussing in that scene, a lot of black women go through. I think especially in our generation, with the dating pool that we have and the politics that black men experience in their community, like community with other men versus what we experience in community with other women. I think black women, we give each other a lot of space and grace and time to learn and heal and figure out who we need to be for our community, and I don't think black men get a lot of that space. And so that's when we see it show up in our partnerships, in our relationships with black men. And yeah, you can definitely have something. And I think a lot of black women watching that scene can relate, but you know, we still have that desire often to still connect with black men, you know, because they still be fine.
I just want to add on that too, that self-love is a politic also. You know, so it's very much so about us seeing ourselves too. You know, like we see me, right? Like that's, anytime you talk about incarceration, you're talking about black men, all right? Like anytime you're talking about police violence, you're talking about black men, all right? Like this is self-love, right? Like Ashley saw herself seeing us, you know, and it was important to document that. It's just important for us to see ourselves, right? Like regardless of the men watching and white people watching and none of that, like we need to see us. We need to see us.
Dr. Bonsu Love, like when you talk about, I just like saying it. You know what I'm saying?
I like it.
Yeah, it got a nice ring to it.
Yeah, I must say so myself, brother. What did that self-love journey look like to you, especially in finding yourself in the space of, and what does your marriage and your union even mean to your politics?
Okay, self-love journey. Man, I think actually my community, my being grounded in my sisterhood, and with my comrades in Chicago really helped my self-love journey, because I felt really genuine love from the folks that you saw in that film. Shout out to Alexis, you know, shout out to just everybody in that film. I think there was just a love without conditions that I felt in that city, which is why three of my bridesmaids that was in my wedding last month is from Chicago in that film, right? So I just felt a real genuine love that really helped me love myself. Like my sisters would remind me who the hell I am sometimes. Like when I be forgetting, they be like, no, you are that girl. Like you need to pick your head up. You know what I'm saying? So I almost said something else, you know. And then I was like, this is being recorded. But in terms of my marriage, first of all, I felt a lot of what Bella was saying in that scene when she was high as hell talking about love, right? Because you know, for a while I didn't even know I would get married to a man. Honestly, I didn't know, because I was just like, man, these men out here really be hurting me. Like they really be hurting me. And then I found one who really does love me unconditionally and unselfishly. And that what you were saying about decentering is not erasure, like actually understands that and actually practices that. Like they exist. And so I think that you know, for me, love has really, I don't want to be dramatic, but just like saved my life.
Yeah. Say that.
Love has saved my life. Capital L. Shout out to Love in the audience too. And so, yeah, I think it just being loved wholly and fully,
As you should.
as I deserve,
As you should.
has really just brings my self-love journey full circle. You know, like I learn new things about love every day in my union, and that helps me love myself better. So I just, shout out to Love is really all I can say. I'm blushing.
Love is revolution.
He is the revolution.
Before I open it up to a few questions for the audience and then final comments from our esteemed panel, I just want to say I'm so glad we had that conversation because love is revolution, black love. And I don't even mean this in the heteronormative way. I'm talking about like black communal platonic love is one of the keys to unity, is how we're going to move forward. And when you see that absent within the movement, you know that we don't have a strong foundation. I think that we have this foundation because in that chasm, women have found ways to support and encourage self-love amongst each other in a way that I wish more men could support you in that. And so when you say you found that, you champion that, it's encouraging, you know, it affirms me. Because I'd be embarrassed, y'all, when idiots be on social media and y'all think that some of these big rappers and all of these things represent black men. It's painful. Because, like, that's why I'm be short with this. But, like, when I did True Life Crime, and I did an episode about Kadari Johnson, a 17-year-old teen that was killed, I'm saying he, but they didn't really know what they wanted to identify as yet. 17. Ends up getting killed ostensibly and allegedly by somebody who they were in a relationship with, who claims they didn't know that they were, trans. And that story, when I'm in the barbershop, is the one that black men talk to me about the most. They don't use all the politically correct terms and all of that, but they like, now how the hell they didn't know? They knew that was, just because that's what you into, what you gotta kill folks for. Like, and it's a real dialogue. And for a minute, sometimes I live so much in the academic and social media space that I forget that the guys that I chill with, smoke with, get haircuts by, are open-minded, are ready to learn, are in that mind frame more than we give them credit for in the stratosphere, even though we have real life experiences where we see the opposite. So when you say that, it's just affirming to me personally. So sorry for that soapbox, but I want to open it up to any questions from the audience. Yes, sir.
Well, I agree that Black Lives Matter. That's why I'm surprised that nobody in the audience, in the film, mentioned Waverly Jones or Waverly Brown or Gregory Foster or Anthony McLean or James Nemerin or Rodney Andrews. Since all of those officers were assassinated while out on duty, shouldn't we remember that black lives and blue lives both matter?
Next question.
Yikes.
No. Let's dialogue. I think, as you, go ahead.
No, because we already brought up the term decentering. So what we did was, if I took a survey of the audience, how many of you would be able to say you've ever watched a film or a piece of media exclusively about young black women? Exclusively about young black queer women? Probably never. Probably never. Because we don't make space for it. Because we erase them from the conversation. Because we act like they don't exist. This is not the space to uplift white people who brutalize black people.
Or black people who brutalize other
Or black people who brutalize black people. This film is about black queer feminist women. If you want that film, then you go make it.
Okay, period.
Next question. Anybody else?
Come on, somebody else.
Come on, somebody.
Please, Lord.
Dr. Bonsu Love.
Okay, period. Okay, period.
I know that when you were in Chicago and you were really active, when you were in the streets, you felt really connected. Now that you moved out of that space and you are doing other work, do you still feel grounded in your involvement in the movement? Do you still find purpose in what you're doing right now?
That's a really good question. And I think there's two different questions in what you're asking. So one, do I still feel grounded in the movement that we just watched? I think it's a mixed bag of yes and no. I do feel a disconnect having physically moved away from Chicago, right? I now live in Columbia, South Carolina. I go to Nana's house every week that y'all saw in the film, the little pink room, that's still my shit. And so yeah, I moved away, so I'm not going to BYP 100 meetings anymore. I'm not running into Bella on the west side of Chicago, sometimes, like, that's not happening anymore. And so, in Chicago is where I was politicized, is where I became active, and so not being there really has significantly shifted my political, activity and the way my activism looks. So now, my entry into, quote unquote movement work looks totally different. It's not at strategy sessions. It's not at protests. I do a lot of politicizing through writing. My parents learned about abolition and became abolitionists through my writing. They read some article I wrote. It was like, damn, fuck the police. And I feel like everybody has different roles and different entry points into this work. It doesn't always have to look like, being at a protest with holding a sign and chants, right? And so I've just had to kind of refine myself or redefine my role in movement work. So it just looks a lot different, and I'm doing it from where I'm at. So in terms of purpose in my work, I'm someone who describes myself as an activist, scholar, writer, and I find a lot of that girl. And so I do find a lot of purpose in the work that I do, because I, again, am grounded in my why. I'm rooted in my past and my present in order to shape my future. And so, I do feel really purposeful in the work that I'm doing, regardless of, me not physically being in Chicago anymore. I do miss Chicago though.
Me too. Man and Shay. I want to start with Bella Vaz for the final word. We're just gonna go down the line. We have one more. Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you, Mr. Love.
I just was wondering if you could talk about the decision to make it a feature-length film instead of a short. Can you talk about the process of making that change?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of accidentally happened.
How many hours of footage?
Yeah, I really like this question. So yeah, we had around 150 hours of footage when it was all said and done, and I think that, so I originally just thought about it as like following this one season in time, following Janaé in her first semester in her PhD program. And then, like I said, the tape of the killing of Laquan McDonald came out. Gary McCarthy was forced to resign. There was also a campaign to oust Anita Alvarez that's not featured in the film. And I felt like I was going to a protest or action or something literally every week. I saw them, I feel like, at least once a week that first year. And so I think having aggregated all that, I just felt like it really was capturing this season in time in Chicago, that it's kind of like those touch points we see in our social movement. So I would say even last summer, the uprisings of 2020 for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor was another one of those touch point moments. And like I said, I had never seen any feature length piece that was centering contemporary Black women in the movement. And so I wanted to give people their flowers while they're still here. I just feel like we don't do that enough for our leaders in our state. Black women deserve feature films.
Okay.
Yes. Dr. Bonsu talked about, I want to give it to Bella first, talked about being grounded in our why. This question is kind of twofold. Why should people see Unapologetic, and what do you want them to take home from?
We are here. We are here. One of the first things I'm caught in the film saying is, we are here to remind you that you haven't won, right? Like all these systems think that they won, they beat us, they kept us down. You haven't won, we're still here. We're still here, it's a continuum. It's a continuum. What we doing today is a continuation of what Frederick Douglass was doing, right? His fight to abolish slavery is now our fight to abolish prisons and police. It keeps going, all right? So it's gonna be another Bella Boss, Janaé, Bonsu, Ashley O'Shea, Morgan Johnson. It's gonna be more of us, right? We will continue to exist, and that's the importance of seeing it, right? Like, Lori Lightfoot is not the only representation of Black queer woman. Right? Like, we exist, right? Other identities, other ideas about how the world should exist, how the world should look, right? We are all artists, right? We are all radically reimagining the world that we inherited and the world that we will leave behind. One thing that I would hope people left the film with, and obviously not, is that blue lives don't exist.
That's a fact.
Blue lives do not exist. All right, you can take your uniform off. All right, I can't take this uniform off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think people should come see this film because it took 4.5 years and cost a lot of money. No, I'm kidding.
First and foremost.
We need to recoup. No, I'm kidding. No, I think there's an unapologetic in every city in the U.S. Like, I was just telling them before we came here, like, we just got to a film festival in Ghana. Like, the Black.
Bonsu, you got me, all right?
Okay.
Oh,
You told me about it.
That's Bonsu, I knew.
That Pongo. Yeah, so the Black struggle is global, it's international, and I just think it's really important for people to, like Bella said, to see themselves. Like, just seeing that and affirming that, I think can really recharge somebody or heal somebody or sustain them to feel like they can keep doing the work that they're doing. So I just hope that it keeps helping to sustain us, because we need as much energy from that as we can get.
That's right.
Yeah. So in addition, I think people need to see Unapologetic because it is an unapologetic counter narrative to what leadership looks like in social movements. I know we have all learned about Martin Luther King Jr. in our schools. We've all learned about Malcolm X. We've all learned about Gandhi. Like, all of these male leaders. And but we have really dope leaders today,
Right now.
who are not these charismatic male figureheads. And Unapologetic tells that story. And it's not just about me and Bella. There's so many other women and gender non-conforming folks and trans folks who are in that film, who are leaders and fearless. And so I think that's number one. And I hope that I really hope that folks take away the fact that movements are generative. Like, this Unapologetic tells a point in time, and I hope from this you are inspired to find your why and your role and what the next ebb and flow of our movements for liberation looks like. Because every single person has a role. So, yeah, I hope that Unapologetic encourages folks to really craft their role in the movement.
Amen.
I don't have anything to add. I'm just going to say thank you so much for being here because you really didn't have to be here. So supporting Black women. See this film because you will be supporting Black women. You will be supporting independent film, Black independent filmmakers and organizers who are making a real change and a real difference in the world.
It was a beautiful film. I felt our beauty reflected and represented, and then Bella comes with the soundbite right after saying black people are beautiful. It was a well-researched film. When you talked about 27,000 complaints filed and only 80 resulting in disciplinary action, and we talk about how we have,
Spin the quotes back, okay?
you know what I'm saying? How we
Okay.
have been systematically targeted, and still someone can watch this and listen but not hear, and decide to talk about a few one-off cases when we talked about being systematically oppressed, 27,000 versus 80. So there are gonna be a few deaf ears, but like the Bible says, you know, those who have ears to hear will hear, and don't cast your pearls before swine. And sometimes the pigs will be in the room. But we thank you guys anyway for casting your pearls before us. Thank you guys so much for being here. A round of applause to the Unapologetic panel. Louder than that, louder than that. My name's Dometi, and it was great to meet y'all and to meet with y'all. Eat some popcorn. Get a drink. To the lobby. We got masks for sale, shirts for sale, and they're supporting black filmmakers and black creators and black revolutionaries. So thank you guys once again for being here.